Who were the 10 greatest Saints in the 2023 NFL season? Well, I'm not going to tell you.
What?
The good news is I got 10 of the best Saints writers, podcasters, and YouTubers to join me and tell you who those players are. Now, if you've been living under a rock and don't know who any of these 10 guys are, not a problem. Links to all 10 of their channels are in the show notes below. Now, typically when people do top 10 lists, they're going to go from 10 to 1, kind of leave the suspense for the front. I'm going from 1 to 10 because the first couple of players are probably pretty well understood, but the list gets a little more interesting the further down the line you get. And this is the order that the players were picked. Now, before we get into the top 10 list, let's talk about 2023 and what an interesting season it was for the New Orleans Saints. We had the beginning of one era, the end of another era. Off the field, we had Mark Ingram trucking a YouTuber. And we had this little guy in shock when Cam Jordan shows up at his school. During the season, when the Saints weren't cleaning things up or chopping wood, we saw Andres Pete excelling at tackle, Jamal Williams trading autographs for anime, Colin Binks Sanders leading the way for Taysom Hill, Jimmy Graham returning to New Orleans and leading a Who Dat chant, several Saints defenders doing the Tommy Cutlets, Eric McCoy arguing with Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara setting all sorts of records, Dennis Allen apologizing, and Jameis Winston being Jameis Winston. One last thing before we jump into it, I'll throw in my own comments at the end of the video, but for now, let's jump into it with Ross Jackson, the GOAT of Saints media, all that and a little bit of Lanyap, here with the #1 player of the 2023 season.
What's going on, everybody? Ross Jackson here from Locked On Saints and the Saints News Network, here to give you the #1 player in the 2024 season, at least in my book, safety Tyrann Mathieu. Why is he ranked so highly for me? Well, yes, he tied with the team lead for interceptions. It was 4, along with Paulson Adebo, was active in the run game, active as a pass defender, all of those pieces as well. Tied for 5th on this team in tackles from the safety spot, along with Alontae Taylor with 75 in total. But for me, honestly, the big thing was the leadership. I talked to Tyrann Mathieu towards the end of the season and asked him about sort of the big turnaround that took place later on in the season for the secondary. And he said it was because he was asked to go up and speak. And in his speech, he challenged the secondary to put it on their backs. And they all responded in a game where they walked away with several takeaways and just played probably one of the better games that we had seen from the Saints secondary. And then that continued on throughout the remainder of the season as well, as they kind of went on that hot streak towards the end of the year. So I think if you look at the fact that the Saints defense did not have the pass rush that it had, that it has had in recent history, the run game didn't necessarily improve on the defensive side. The one thing that absolutely kept this team from from being in a position to where they were allowing teams to put points on the board came down to its secondary, led by Tyrann Mathieu. We saw an 11 interception jump in a year from one year to another year where Tyrann Mathieu was active in taking the football away. By the way, even last year where they had only 7 interceptions on the season, he had 2 of them. He had a pair of them. He was the guy that was out there getting those picks and getting those interceptions. Not to mention, he ended up walking an interception back in a touchdown, or for a touchdown, against the New England Patriots in 2024 as well. So for me, Tyrann Mathieu is just a guy that checked every box. He was vocal. He was a leader. He led by example. He did it all, and he went out there and produced and got it done in every phase of the game, despite having to deal or play behind a defense that otherwise took some considerable steps back in certain areas. But that didn't keep this New Orleans Saints secondary from being in a situation to where they could be the leaders of this team. And as Tyrann Mathieu, the leader of that unit, he, for me, was the best player in 2023 for the New Orleans Saints.
Big Q, the godfather of Saints YouTube, had the #2 pick. Let's see who he's got.
Shout out to the mighty Who Dat Nation. Big Q representing the Sports Coma and the Great Saint Think Tank. We in this one for, a call at Chris Olave, man. Listen, I chose Chris Olave in terms of my player for the Saints this past season because all the adversity that he went through with the offense, the dysfunction early on in the season, they had some issues. with the quarterback, with the head coach, all this stuff was going on. But despite the fact that all that went on with Chris Olave, he was still able to garner some pretty good statistics for the past season, and could have been better had the offense been a little bit more in rhythm. So this past season is 16 games, which is one more than he did last year. 87 catches, over 1,100 yards. He had 138 targets thrown his way. He averaged about 13 yards per catch. He had 5 touchdowns on the year. Now, if you compare that versus his 22 statistics, he had 72 catches of 119 targets, just almost 1,100 yards with 4 touchdowns. So an improvement in terms of receptions for Chris Olave. And listen, with better offensive and quarterback play, this guy could have had over 100 catches for the Saints this past season. As you can see, we understood early on that Chris Olave is a phenom. He had several really, really good catches. The guy is a baller at another level, and it'll be really fun to see how Clint Kubiak incorporates Chris Olave into his style of offense, and hopefully we can get better quarterback play, more offensive cohesion. That can also help a lot of stuff going on with Chris Olave, as we've seen toward the back end of the regular season when the quarterback was able to find Chris Olave in one-on-one matchups with no safety support. He was able to shine. Terrific wide receiver, catches it if you throw it in this vicinity, makes some of the more really tough catches. It's terrific coordination, and I'm looking forward to him improving going into this upcoming season, man, with good health and a very competent and consistent offense. Expect Chris Olave to even thrive better than his 2023 numbers. That'll do it for me. This is Big Q representing the mighty Who Dat Nation, the Great Saint Think Tank, and the Sports Coma. Y'all please feel free to subscribe, like, and share, and I'm gonna holler at you on the next one. Much love, and Who Dat.
Just had a quick wardrobe change for number 3. Jono Barnes, take it away.
Boy, I'm glad I'm coming in at number 3, because top 10 Saints players, after what happened last year, we got to have 10 top Saints players? I mean, I know we won 9 games, but but at number 3 is Carl Granderson. And let me tell y'all something. It's one thing to play great when you're in search of a contract, but when you get that contract and you still play great, man, that's some this shit more than the game energy right there. And Carl Granderson exemplified that with 8.5 sacks, 77 tackles, and a forced fumble. Sadly, he was probably the only consistent guy on the D-line getting pressure week in and week out. But he had a hell of a year. The sky is definitely the limit for him. And oh yeah, he definitely knows that this shit more than a game.
Forever telling it like it is. Chris Rosvoglou, my fellow Northeast guy, he's in at number 4. Who you got, Chris?
What's up, Who Dat Nation? It's Chris Rosvoglou of the Straight Up Saints podcast, continuing our top 10 Saints of 2023. And we got to continue this list with the one and only Demario Davis. I mean, there's so much to be said about Demario, both as a leader and as a player. So let's start off with the leadership skills of Demario. I think when you talk about just being the voice in the locker room, the guy that people can go to when things are up, when things are down, he is that rock for the Saints team. And I could be honest and say that I think if Demario's leadership skills aren't where they're at, this team could have fell when they were in their losing streak, when they were feeling like things were caving in. And because of guys like him, you don't have that problem. You're able to rebound. So that's a huge plus. But let's talk about the player, the football aspect of things for Demario Davis. For starters, 7th season in a row with at least 100+ tackles, had a career high, or at least tied his career high in sacks with 6.5. And that was a big component for the Saints, right? The defensive line wasn't playing its greatest, and all of a sudden, Demario starts helping out with the blitz. You start to get more pressure on opposing quarterbacks, more pressure, better chance of winning games for the Saints. So he did a great job there in that regard. In terms of accolades, All-Pro honors again, going to the second team. 5th straight year for him to get All-Pro honors. First team All-Pro for Pro Football Focus. He was graded incredibly high all season long. So that was a huge plus for Demario in terms of getting his recognition, which he also made it to the Pro Bowl. Better late than never. And for him to go to the Pro Bowl and win Pro Bowl MVP and kind of show what he can do when he's on that stage. Not a surprise to us Saints fans, but it's good to see him get that national recognition. So much to be said about Demario Davis. But the one thing in all this that I think needs to get even more love, durability. Even though he was banged up at times this season, he played through all 17 games, which is huge for the Saints to be able to have that dependable leader in the middle of their defense, calling the shots, making the big-time plays, and making things happen. And that's what DeMario did, and it makes life easier for guys like Pete Werner to lean on him to get that leadership, but also learn how to become a better player. So much praise for DeMario Davis. Just when you feel like, man, is this the year that he's going to slow down? He proves us that he's one of those athletes that's ageless, kind of like a LeBron James, where you keep wondering when they're going to slowly go down and hit the decline, and they just continue to level up their games and find ways to keep us just captivated by their greatness. So shout out to DeMario Davis, another fantastic season for number 56.
Now, there's a lot of funny guys on this list, but my guy Devin Snow, he might be the funniest YouTuber as far as Saints content and that kind of stuff out there. Devin coming in at number 5.
You know, there's a difference in playing for the Saints and being a Saint. A lot of motherfuckers done played for the Saints. You know? You played mediocre, went on their way. Because this was a mediocre season. It was a very few ups, lots of downs season. It was a stressful, emotional, emotions pouring all over the place. So, you want to find the bright spot. Where was the bright spot? Where was the bright spot in the Saints season? And look no further than the only light you really see. The only light you really see, Jameis Winston. That's my nomination for 2023 Saint of the Year. It's Jameis. With limited playtime, Jameis. He is a saint. You look in the dictionary, saint picture of Jameis Winston. It's just he epitomizes what a saint should be, what it has been, in the past, the ones that we love forever, and he barely even played. Top 3 most exciting moments of the season. One of them had to be Jameis Winston across the whole fucking field to A.T. Perry for a touchdown. Only Jameis. Only Jameis throw a ball in the air and make you want to shit your pants while it's in the air, and then execute it for points. That's Jameis Winston on the sideline singing "Move, bitch, get out the way" to Derek Carr. Word for word, with the energy, with the ludicrous energy. That's the people I want to sing songs with, bro, that I know. Motherfuckers who gonna give me the energy. He felt like he was ludicrous on the sideline right there. That's Jameis. So many... I mean, come on, bro. Who gave you more memorable moments than Jameis Winston this 2023 football season? Saint-wise, I just can't think of a single motherfucker. So this is easy for me, dude. And then he capped it off at the end of the year, going rogue, and then cooking that buttermilk biscuit motherfucker that he cooked in the locker room. That guy could have went on his way. No, he continued, and Jameis laid him down, respectfully, like some new hotel sheets. Just laid him down, and then went on his way. That's a saint. That's a saint, bro. Looking out for his teammates, looking out for the fans, taking responsibility. Jameis Winston. That's my nomination. Respect your body.
Okay, we have reached the halfway point. Hope you're enjoying things so far. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that promo code for SeatGeek.com. Promo code John Butler. Save yourself $20. Let's get back to it. Trace Girouard coming in with the number 6 pick, and don't forget to throw him a super chat when you're on his channel. The guy will do a lot of things for a super chat.
What's happening, Who Dat Nation? My name is Trace Girouard, and I am the host at Saints Now by Chat Sports, where we provide daily videos, short-form content, and live coverage of the New Orleans Saints during the regular season and throughout the offseason, including live watch parties. So if you haven't heard of our channel, if you haven't seen our coverage, I encourage you to check out what we do on YouTube and social media everywhere. But I wanted to talk about Rashid Shaheed because he's one of my favorite players in recent history, and he's one of my current favorite players on this Saints roster. So I want to say thank you to John Butler for asking me and including me to be a part of this video. It's a huge honor, and I am very grateful for the opportunity. So thank you guys, and Let me just tell you about Rashid Shaheed, man. I love this guy ever since he was a UDFA signee out of Weber State. I've just been so high on this kid. I mean, since day one, I've been calling him Rashid, the need for speed, Shaheed. You can go back to last year when he first started getting touches, as early as that Bengals game when he popped off for that 40-plus yard rushing touchdown. Just in terms of the player this season, I mean, it's so impressive what he can do. Not only is he a dynamic pass catcher and ball carrier in terms of just what he can provide for the offense, but he also has such a dangerous element to the return game into special teams. He was a Pro Bowl selection, a first-team All-Pro selection in his second year in the NFL. That doesn't just happen. That's not an accident. This kid is talented. He's special, and I love what he can do. In terms of the receiving, guys, I mean, his production speaks for itself. I mean, 46 receptions, 719 yards, 15.6 yards per catch. He had 5 touchdowns on the season and was good for 27 catches, which to me means anytime he had the ball, almost anytime he had the ball, he was either scoring or extending a drive, which was huge. He also had 58 yards as his longest reception of the season, which is unbelievable. Another fun fact about Rashid Shaheed, in terms of players who had multiple 40-yard or more receptions, Shaheed is number 3, baby. He had 7 catches of 40-plus yards or more. That's only behind Tyreek Hill and Amari Cooper, who had 9 and 8. Rashid Shaheed also has more 40-yard receptions than Mike Evans. Just putting that out there. For those of you who are curious, he had 6. I love this player. I think that he adds so much speed, so much fun to the offense. But like I said, the receiving numbers, or the return numbers, are even more impressive. I mean, out of Weber State, this guy was a record-breaking player. He set the tone for what it meant to be an effective return man at Weber State and really created a mold for players to follow his path to the NFL. The return yards for Rashid Shaheed. We'll never forget that one touchdown against the Packers. Of course, we wish to win that game, but silver lining, because there always is one. That Rashid Shaheed return was absolutely electric, and it was so much fun. It was great just to see him finally get that touchdown. It felt like so many times last year he had a return, and he was so close to breaking away, breaking free, and popping off for a big-time play. And he finally did it against the Packers this past season, which was awesome. 25 returns this year, 339 yards, 1 touchdown, and a long of 76. His average yards per return was 13.6 yards. That's really, really good. And that's just in punts. In kick returns, he had 18 returns for 340 yards with an average return of 21.3 yards. This guy is a stud. He's a great football player, and I think the New Orleans Saints are very lucky to have him. I hope that he can stick around the team for a very long time, because I think between Chris Olave, A.T. Perry, and Rashid Shaheed, you have a really strong trio of 3 young wide receivers for Derek Carr, or whoever the thrower of the ball, whoever the quarterback is in the future. But once again, guys, I love me some Rashid Shaheed. Show him some love in the comment section. He's a stud, and I can't wait to see what he can keep doing. Don't forget to check out the coverage over at Saints Now by Chat Sports. Absolutely appreciate you guys for listening to what I had to say. Shout out to John Butler. Appreciate you. And don't forget to subscribe to his channel as well.
Jeff Nowak returns for a second year to this list. He's given us our number 7 player.
Jeff Nowak here, WWL Radio Saints sideline reporter and co-host of the Inside Black and Gold podcast. We're breaking down the top 10 players on the Saints this season. And, you know, as I went through the list, one guy that became very obvious to me early on is cornerback Paulson Adebo. Is a guy who came into this season competing for the starting job, you know, and I had some conversations with people early in the season about, oh, should it be Alontae Taylor? Should it be this? Should it be that? And I landed pretty early on Paulson, and it's just because the guy makes plays. The guy has been there. He has started since day one, you know, and he showed that this year. He showed the growth this year. You know, he 11 passes defense, 4 interceptions. Those were both tied for 5th in the NFL. He was just a guy who made big plays in big moments. His 2-game stretch in wins over the Bears and the Colts was one of the best runs of cornerback play you will ever see. That's 4 interceptions, a forced fumble. I know he got coverage grades over 90 in both of those games, both Saints wins in both games that if the defense doesn't put up the way it did with a scuffling offense, particularly against the Bears, I don't know if you see the results you did. So, you know, happy to see Paulson really make his impact in year 3, very physical, a guy who, you know, people are talking about Marshawn Lattimore, potentially moving on from Marshawn Lattimore this offseason. One of the reasons you're even considering that is because Paulson Adebo stepped up and became that CB1, particularly in the year after Marshawn went out and you're able to win 4 of your final 5 games. So to me, this is a no-brainer. Paulson Adebo is easily one of the top 10 Saints on defense, maybe one of your top 3 players this season. And I think big days are ahead for him. Heading into a contract year, I think a big deal is on the horizon.
TJay Jones giving us our number 8 player. Who you got, TJ?
Hey, what's going on? It is yours truly, TJay Jones. And yes, I am the host of the State of the Saints podcast. And I was asked to do a video on who I feel should be in the top 10 best Saints players of 2023. Now, there's so many different players that I can think of. Now, I know what some people are saying, TJ, we didn't make the playoffs yet again. But even though the Saints are having some down times and they haven't been into the playoffs in like 3 seasons, there still are some bright spots on this football team. And one guy that I want to talk about is an individual. If you look at his stats, it probably will tell you that he didn't make much of an impact, but I have to say that he did. And I'm talking about wide receiver A.T. Perry. Now, A.T. Perry, looking at his stats, like I mentioned, he only had 12 receptions, 243 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Now, that's not knocking anybody's socks off. But when you think about the impact that he had on the New Orleans Saints offense down the stretch, especially when Michael Thomas hurt himself and couldn't come back, they thrust A.T. Perry into the lineup, and he was only getting maybe like 1 or 2 catches per game. But once again, you think about the 12 catches and the 4 touchdowns. It tells you for every 3 receptions, every 3rd reception this guy has ends up in a touchdown. So the fact that he had 4 touchdowns on an offense that kind of struggled and really couldn't put up points that often. I know the last game of the season, they beat the brakes off the Falcons. But we all know that that was an outlier. A.T. Perry is a special player. And I think a lot of what we didn't see from A.T. Perry had a lot to do with one of the main reasons why Pete Carmichael is no longer the offensive coordinator. When you know that you have special players, when you know that you have diamonds in the rough, even if it's a player that's been around for a long time, but he's not giving you that much, but you see that young player out there hungry and making plays, you got to go with that guy. And I always thought that the New Orleans Saints got a steal when they drafted A.T. Perry. A.T. Perry has all the statistical records at Wake Forest. He is one of the best wide receivers to ever come out of the ACC. He is a special wide receiver. And I think a lot of people are starting to see that. And we see what his catch radius is. We see that he can make those contested catches. And those are some of the things that I felt like the New Orleans Saints wide receivers lacked. Now they don't have an issue. Even with Chris Olave, when he first got into the league, it was a little bit of an issue with those contested catches. But now, as we can see, he's starting to come on. Give A.T. Perry more opportunities to knock it out the park, and I guarantee you he will. That's the reason why the Who Dat Nation are so excited to see him in 2024. And I just hope whoever the Saints appoint as their offensive coordinator, they find out how special this guy is, and they just don't have him on the sidelines. This is a guy, give him the opportunities, and I guarantee you he'll probably be a Pro Bowl player or even one of those players that we talk about when it comes to Saints football for years to come. So thank you all so much. That's who I feel. Shouts out to A.T. Perry. I know he should have a really good 2024. Looking forward to seeing what he can do in his 2nd year with the Black and Gold. Till next time, All I got to say is, who that?
Half of the Real Fan Sports crew, Zach Bell, who you got at number 9?
What's good, everybody? My name is Zachary Bell from Real Fan Sports, and one of my top 10 players for the New Orleans Saints in the 2023-2024 NFL season has got to be no other than Alvin Kamara. Now, it was a short year for AK, as he only played in 13 games, missed a couple games in the beginning of the week due to a suspension, missed a game at the end of the season due to an ankle injury. And if I'm being honest with you guys, it really was a quiet year when you look at it from AK's standards, the standard that he's held for himself over his first 6 seasons in the NFL and with the New Orleans Saints. It was quiet, but the thing that impressed me the most was where he strived in this season, and that was the leadership role. For a New Orleans Saints team that really lacked leadership in the offensive side of the ball, AK knew when he needed to step up and be that voice for the team, whether it was holding players accountable or speaking up about the team in post-game pressers. In Alvin's 7th season in the NFL, he finished with 180 carries, 3.9 yards average, totaling for 694. He also had 75 receptions on 86 targets, with 466 yards. He finished with a total of 1,160 yards and 6 touchdowns. Although this year did not pan out the way Kamara wanted it to, it was a special year that will cement AK in New Orleans Saints history. The first achievement came during the Week 5 matchup versus New England Patriots, where Alvin Kamara set the franchise record for most touchdowns on a 2-yard run into the end zone. This touchdown allowed him to pass up the Saints' great Marcus Colston. The previous record set by Colston was 72 and has now been surpassed by one of, if not the best running back to ever suit up in a New Orleans Saints uniform, Alvin Kamara. He now holds that record with 54 rushing touchdowns, 23 receiving, and 1 punt return touchdown, coming to a total of 78. And that's not the only franchise record that AK set this year. He also set a franchise record for the most rushing touchdowns in New Orleans Saints history when he brought it to the house on a 1-yard touchdown run versus the Detroit Lions in Week 13. This record was previously held by his mentor, his former teammate, Mark Ingram. And the record breaking doesn't stop there. I mean, that's 1. There's 2. We're coming up to number 3, where Alvin Kamara set the franchise record with the most seasons of 1,000+ scrimmage yards. AK now in his 7th season has reached 1,000+ scrimmage yards. That means since his rookie year all the way to now, he's never been less than 1,000. It's an absolute unbelievable mark for him to hit, passing up once again Marcus Colston. And to top it all off, of course, there's one more franchise record that we can't forget about, and that is the franchise record for the most total scrimmage yards in Saints history. Alvin Kamara now holds that record with a total of 10,048 yards. This year was one for the record books for Alvin Kamara, with plenty more franchise records on the brink of being broken going into the next season. And regardless of the overall results of how this season panned out for the Saints or how it panned out for AK, the accomplishments set by Alvin Kamara should not be overlooked, and that's why he is one of my top 10 New Orleans Saints players for the 2023-2024 NFL season.
And no Saints transaction is official until it gets followed by Ryan Hinton. Ryan Hinton finishing out the list at number 10.
What up? That boy Wolf of the Saints Block Party Podcast. Make sure you check us out. The player I'm going to talk about is Jimmy Graham, the great tight end, drafted by the Saints in 2010 in the 3rd round, former basketball player at the University of Miami, came to the Saints and had a career that was on a Hall of Fame trajectory. They brought him back this season, and I thought he had a fun season. We thought, he could have been used more, but even though he only had 6 catches, he had 4 touchdowns. He still was that deadly red zone threat that we come to be familiar with. He got the crowd hype in a season where there wasn't much excitement. So we enjoyed him, man. As he leaves and goes on to his next phase in his life, I wish him the best because He was a great player. There's an alternate universe somewhere where he never got traded, and he remained with the Saints, playing under Drew Brees and Sean Payton. And I truly think he would definitely be a first ballot Hall of Famer if that happened. But also, also just an interesting story, the way he came up, foster care and stuff like that, and a lot of the things he went through with adversity growing up, and for him to be where he is now, a successful NFL player that played 13 years in the league. He's a pilot, licensed pilot. He drives boats all over the world. He endurance training, all kind of stuff, man. That dude, just a dope player, a fun player. Made it fun to be a Saints fan when he was with the Saints. So we're going to miss him. Again, this is Dat Boy Wolf, Saints Block Party Podcast. Check us out.
All right, so one last time, we're going to count down this list. Number 10 was Jimmy Graham. Number 9 was Alvin Kamara. Number 8, A.T. Perry. Number 7 was Paulson Adebo. Number 6 was Rashid Shaheed. Number 5 was Jameis Winston. Number 4 was Demario Davis. Number 3 was Carl Granderson. Number 2, Chris Olave. And the top spot, Tyrann Mathieu. All right, so now that you got the top 10, couple of surprises. Actually, when you look at the list from last year versus this year, there's a lot of names that were high on the list last year. Cam Jordan and Taysom Hill, and there was a couple of others that just didn't even make the list this year. Also, guys like Andrus Peat and Eric McCoy, did pretty solid jobs on the offensive line. Lattimore, not on the list. So definitely some surprises, and definitely some, as far as like the order is concerned, also some surprises. And then actually kind of comical maybe, the fact that you've got the backup quarterback on this list and not the starter. It's pretty funny stuff. Anywho, I appreciate you joining me for this premiere. I can't thank you guys enough for all the support you've given me so far. Who dat, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.